On Monday, President Muhammadu Buhari set up the Economic Advisory Council following a dissolution of the Economic Management Team. The 8-man advisory council headed by Professor Doyin Salami with Dr. Mohammed Sagagi as vice chairman and the senior special assistant to the President on Development Policy, Dr. Mohammed Salisu, as the secretary, is given the mandate to advise President Muhammadu Buhari on economic policy matters, including fiscal analysis, economic growth, and a range of internal and global economic issues. What exactly would this council be responsible for? Yeah, they'll be telling the president, advising him on certain things. What? Okay, no, let me leave that. So help us look at this, the task before them. As some will say, the economy needs serious scrutiny. We have Olufemi Adiagbo, who's the MD, Naving ICT Advisors. Incidentally, all our guests are from in our Abuja studio. Tokwe Faswa is an economist, and Odilim Enwegbara is a development economist. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Morning. Morning to be here.
Indeed. So let me start with Mr. Enwegbara. Mr. Enwegbara, what was your... how did you react to that news of the dissolution of the economic management team to set up an economic advisory council? How did you see it?
Thank you all for the question. I think at the end of the day, we all know that an economy needs advisors. But let me run you through quickly history of economic developments. In 1489, King Henry VII, didn't know anything about economics. But what he did was to ban export of woolen materials from the UK to the lower countries, that is Netherlands and Belgium. By 1792, the first Secretary of Treasury of the United States, Alexander Hamilton, was being advised by the so-called famous economist, Adam Smith. He told Adam Smith, I don't need your economic theory. I know the simple application of economic policy that I will use to develop American economy to become an industrial economy. By 1841, Germany did the same thing America did. By 1868, Emperor Meiji banned the importation of goods and they started industrialization of Japan. By 1962, General Park started industrialization of his country without bringing economists. By 1980, Deng started industrialization of China without looking for any economists. They use conventional approach to problems. I'm not saying that asking economists to help you is a taboo. But what I'm trying to say is that economic theory, economic advisory, economic application in economic development is 30% of the requirement for an economy to grow. What we need is a president that is proactive, a president that knows that if this is right, I must do it, no matter the cost of my political ambition. That is what we are supposed to be talking about. Now you bring a team of, I don't know, some of these people are actually liberal economists. Like, I don't want to mention their names so that nobody will accuse me of anything. We need people who are players, besides being economists, who are players in the industry. I was expecting, Mr. President, to set up what I call, and that's what I put in the Articles Economic Blueprint, was Corporate Nigerian Council, Corporate Nigerian Economic Development Council. That council will meet once in a month. They meet with all the industry players. They will meet and look at where do we have leakages, where do we have to do certain things in order to grow the economy. If you bring Dangote, bring Tony Elumelu, bring Jimmy Ovia, bring Innocent Motors, bring Nwora, the owner of Nwora Palms, which is going to actually change the palm oil industry in this country. You bring these people once in a month and listen to them and know what your government has to do to help them, not to bring economists who actually have political ambitions. Sorry to say that. Soludo has a political ambition. He wants to become governor of Anambra State, and maybe that's why he joined that team. But at the end of the day, you don't need these mass names, because the problem is that we believe in names, not ideas. What I'm saying in essence is that, Mr. President, go back and bring industry players and meet with them in a town hall meeting once in a month and listen to them and know where you can help them. And if you listen to them and they tell you where you can help them, these are the people that develop the economy.
Okay, but,
Two,
but
I am appreciative of the closure of our borders. So
okay.
that one is fantastic.
Mr. Nwera, thank you very much. We'll get back to you in a bit. Let me take this over to Mr. Adiagbo. Mr. Adiagbo, the president's move now has been commended by some. Indeed, one of those that contested in the 2019 elections against him all commended him for picking up his idea. Based on what Mr. Nwera has said, the president picked people, as some will say in some quarters, that are looking at the two sides of the divide, the side of the players and those that are managing, so that they can look at the two sides and advise him on the next line of action. But Mr. Nwera is saying the president should instead get those who are playing in the industry to be part of that team. Do you agree with him?
Good morning. Well, to the question, no, not entirely. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive in the first place. I think the President's Advisory Council features very seasoned observers of the economy, and they are players in their own ways. Bismarck Rewani is a player in the corporate space. He's also a very well-respected analyst. These people also come with views which are not necessarily the same views as those of government. For example, if you follow the trajectory of their thoughts on critical issues like subsidy removal, for example, you see an infusion of views of people from even the IMF, people who are, should I say, pro-subsidy removal. So maybe this can also be viewed as government willing to take an infusion of ideas from, if you like, people who aggregate the views of private sector, aggregate the views of major development bodies, and basically put that together into improving the action plan for moving the nation forward. So I don't really see it from that political trajectory. If I may quickly add, though, I think I agree with a part of what the gentleman said in terms of, should I say, rote economics, because even the practice of economics has changed dramatically now towards a social dimension, where economics is no longer treated as an applied science, but is layered on the very, very dynamic variables of human behavior. If you go and read the 2017 Nobel Prize winner, Richard Taylor, if you go and read his citation, you will see that behavioral economics is becoming very, very important, which requires a lot of accurate market data, which I'm afraid in some cases we may not have, because we see our economy is about, is it half a $1 trillion? But we also say we have about 80% informal sector. So if you have 80% informal sector that you don't really capture, if you have a seismic shift of the economy towards social media, for example, and you don't capture these things, it becomes very, very hard to articulate fiscal policy. So I expect and hope this team will bring their wealth of experience, merge it with data, look at where the data gaps are, look at what mistakes have been made in the past, and basically advise the president on that.
Mr. Fashua, the question I wanted to ask you is about action in terms of decisiveness. Now, this team is meant to tell the president or advise the president on the next line of action as regards the economy. There are several areas that a lot of people have talked about. Nigeria needs decisive action. For instance, power, infrastructure, the value or the power of the naira, the refineries, strategic production lines to create job opportunities, quite a number, a plethora of things and all of that. What would you say about that? Do you think this is the time we will see more action? Do we see the team, the president's team, getting into action more, especially also that they have some kind of deadlines to deliver or to report back on their actions?
Right. Thank you very much. Good to be here. First of all, I think I'm worried that there's no proper change of baton between the old and the new. I'm actually quite surprised that the vice president's team, perhaps the Dikolu team, has been disbanded. I still find it difficult to believe. But even if it were, I mean, why can't they work together? Like Femi said, these two teams are not meant to be mutually exclusive, including the idea that we should bring, the private sector guys on board. For example, I think under, maybe it is under Obasanjo or even Goodluck Jonathan, we had a team of those private sector guys. And of course, that itself was criticized. That, look, these are guys that are already benefiting from the system. Why are you also bringing them in? Because, of course, there's this huge fear about capitalism that those who make money are able to use their money to buy policies, as it were. I also want to quickly disagree with Femi, though, that I don't believe this economy is as big as we say it is. Really, that's the truth. So if we say there's a certain 80% informal economy, that suggests that, look, this economy could be a $1 trillion economy. In India, at 1.3 billion people, is 2.5 trillion, 2.7 trillion. That's the economy. The United States itself is sub 20 trillion. Now, in terms of economic complexity and even the size, of course, United States, we have 350 million people plus there. And of course, the complexity of the economy, how they play in the defense sector, how they play even in the educational sector. Everybody goes to Harvard to go and learn something or the other, and we're traveling there all the time. How many people are coming here? All right, so when you look at that, you realize that, look, the figures we have already is tainted with politics and corruption. People have come and put different kind of figures in terms of our population, in terms of the size of the economy, in terms of what's going on. People have done all sorts of things. It's a huge joke. I do believe that we should invest more in getting data. So now, in terms of this gentleman that have just been appointed, I think we're back again to having to tell them about the new economics. Femi mentioned behavioral economics, which is also part of the new economics. The world is talking about innovation economics, for example, evolution economics, in terms of the fact that you cannot progress as an economy except you innovate your products. We're talking about economic complexity, which is the knowledge quotient that you bring into the goods that you export. Well, if you look at Nigeria now, we're just talking about crude oil. At best, we'll talk about exporting some more cocoa and so on and so forth. So we're not adding as much value. And look at what we need. So I think that, and of course, there's also complexity economics, which goes against the idea of homo economicus, that this idea that every human being is rational and taking rational decisions, realize that no, human beings take a lot of emotional decisions, and economics is much more complex than as presented by Adam Smith up to date. All right. So, but that said, I think that these gentlemen should be, they should be hitting the ground running. The president needs advice. I would want that committee to probably be enlarged, that the private sector guys we're talking about could also meet with these people from time to time. I like their composition. Some of them are good people. We know them in the space. Someone like Soludo has very robust thinking in terms of the economy, even though some people will argue that we didn't see that when he was in CBN and so on. But I think it's a very, very smart person doing Salami. I think there's going to be a balance. People like Professor Ode Ojowu is not quite on the right wing of economics, so there's a kind of balance going on there. So they have their job cut out for them. The Minister of Finance said, keeps repeating that we have a revenue problem, not a debt problem. I wrote back, in my columns in Premium Times and so on, that, look, Madam Minister, yes, we do have a revenue problem, but we also have a debt problem, and we now have an expenditure problem. All right, because we haven't actually done the right thing in spending in the right way. We're still talking about our usual indulgences have been kept intact for those who are in government. You've kept it intact, but you should have known where is the vision 5 years ago to know that a day will come such as today where we'd already be panicking about the future. I mean, we've heard it said in a few government circles that already we're on a fiscal cliff. All right, that we're going to have, if we're not careful, a fiscal crisis. And in the international scene as well, globally, people are talking about the onset of another recession. And where is this going to catch us? In fact, the other day that Saudi, some of their oil installation was bombed, we felt, okay, some people were even dancing to the market. Oh, now crude oil is going to get to 80. It did go to 80, but you can see the rate at which it recovered back. In spite of all of that shorting, now crude oil is down to about $63, within a few days. And OPEC has predicted that next year and into 2021, there's going to be a kind of downturn in the crude oil market. So now is the time. But you see, sometimes it's very saddening that we only wait until we start to panic and start to run all over the place, and then you tell the people that hard times are back here. But when the good times were here, the people did not know that the good times were here. You only tell them the bad news. What about when the good news was here? You kept all your indulgences intact, all your appurtenances of office kept intact. We are talking here about cars and the ones that the Senate people want to buy. I mean, we have an Innocent here, we have a Pojo here. In other countries, you would ensure you lock down the system for now and ensure that we patronize that which is local and keep the money within the family. And I think that's what we should do going forward.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Fashua. Now, certainly the council has its work cut out. But Mr. Adeagbo, Neota had mentioned some areas which he thinks are key, which they should be looking at. But what other areas do you think they should be paying serious attention to? And put that into the context of the fact that this council is reporting directly to the president. This same president, who in some quarters has been accused of having no idea of what the economy is about.
Okay, I think I appreciated all the things he said, but let me add to some of the things he said. For example, this council should focus on how to ensure that there's security in Nigeria. However, they can advise Mr. President to ensure the freedom of movement and ensure that life and property are protected. Because if you don't do that, the economy cannot move an inch. That is one. Two, I would expect them to advise Mr. President, even though this is not economics, that there's an urgency for judicial reform. Our judiciary is not encouraging foreign direct investment. Foreigners are afraid to enter into business negotiations and partnerships with Nigeria because should there be any conflict, our judiciary will take 20 years to resolve it, if at all it will resolve it. And no foreign investor will do that. For example, now, let me digress a second. The owner of FR Palm, which is a startup, is about to inject $5 billion into the palm oil industry. And is already talking to foreigners to bring an equity of $7 billion because the palm oil industry, I don't know if we know, is $200 billion industry today. And Indonesia and Malaysia are making double the money Nigeria is making in oil from palm oil. And if Nigeria could allow people like the person I'm talking about, the owner of FR Palm, to bring in his $5 billion and look for another $7 billion in there, Nigeria in the next 5 years will be exporting palm oil and be making over 30 to 40 billion from palm oil. So what I'm saying in essence is that these people should find a way to ensure that our judiciary protects businesses and resolve business conflict as quickly as possible and ensure that it's not the highest bidder that gets the kind of justice that we are still having in this country. So that should be done. I completely agree with him with innovation, but also we need to ensure that infrastructure is put in the hands of private sector because our infrastructure needs about $500 billion. The government cannot get it in the next 50 years. So, and also because when the Dangotes are in the infrastructure sector, they know because they are using their hard-earned currency or hard-earned money or hard-earned savings, they must invest where the return on investment is high. But when you allow government to be the one determining the investment in infrastructure, government is politically motivated in investing in infrastructure. So government invests in those areas, in those states, or in those regions where government want a political benefit from there. Look at Lagos. Lagos today is supposed to be, because Lagos, VAT we earn in this country, about 50% comes from Lagos. Lagos is supposed to be giving about 50% of our investment in infrastructure to modernize Lagos. Because if you modernize Lagos, you get more revenue from Lagos. Finally, let me close. Today, there's what is called Easy VAT, which fortunately I put it together and it's a high-tech system that can block leakages and wastages in the VAT collection and remittances. Right now, the FIRS for the past 2 months, I have already given it to them because with this, nobody can evade tax, VAT collection, nor VAT remittance. But FIRS, as I'm talking to you today, only called us for a meeting, and the meeting was not serious. So what I'm saying is that government must look beyond economics. I'm not against economics because that is what I do for a living. But government must bring the kinds of people who understand the complexity of the problem. Innocent Motors should be given all the billions he needs in this world. So that and government should stop buying foreign-made cars. And because in 1938, the Japanese government made it difficult for American cars to be sold or used in Japan. That's how Toyota, inventor called Toyota, came into being. Why shouldn't we encourage innocent? Why
Okay,
shouldn't we
Mr.
encourage those?
Nwagbara. Thank you, Mr. Nwagbara. Let me move to Mr. Adeagbo. There's been plenty of talk about us moving from being an oil economy, and a lot has been said about agriculture because the oil wells are going to dry up and the price of oil has been not too favorable. What are your thoughts about the efforts we have made so far towards leaving oil and facing other areas, especially agriculture?
Thank you very much. It's a very good question. Well, I mean, to sustain a human being, the human being needs to feed first to even be alive to think about other things. So the ability to feed yourself is critical. And I think government has emphasized over many decades, to be honest. I remember Operation Feed the Nation back in the Shagari era. And, you know, there's been a lot of, if you like, talk and efforts towards moving us forward as an agro-centric economy. And I think, you know, depending on who you believe, government puts out a lot of data in terms of what its anchor borrower scheme, NERSAL, all the intervention initiatives are achieving, that people have gone back to the farms. Local productivity has gone up. It's boosted employment. I have a young lady who used to work as my PA many years ago. She's an agripreneur now. She turns over 3 digits in the millions every year. I mean, Abdul Salam, my name is. So there is tangible evidence of this going forward. And I want to also make 2 quick points. One aligned to the agri thing you mentioned. Venezuela used to be an agro-centric economy about 30 years ago. And then they went into the, should I say, Dutch disease of oil, found oil. Small country, 32 or 33 million people. They ran into exactly the same situation we did when the dollar, when the oil price collapse occurred. I mean, we've seen the pictures, we've seen the data. People can't even, the average Venezuelan has lost 10 kilograms in weight. We are cited by WHO as having an obesity crisis, where 32% of us are now chronically obese. There are too many paradoxes in our economy. Last year, we spent $6.2 billion on data alone, not voice. If you go back to the middle of our recession, and I looked at all the NIBS indicators, ATM withdrawals, e-commerce spending, structure of importation, we were still importing human hair, or should I say fake hair, to the tune of about $200 million. A lot of it was just coming through Benin Republic. The data is there. So when you look at our consumption behavior, go to Lagos, everywhere is an event center. Kano, event center. Abuja, event centers. Parties every week, Ashwebi economy. And then you say this is the poverty capital of the world as well.
Wow.
So I think we need new thinking around what we call poverty. Because poverty in the Nigerian sense may be poverty of appearance, maybe poverty of dysfunction in how we do things, maybe poverty of squalor, but maybe not the $1.90 poverty, because Nigerians over decades, across the entire pyramid, have figured out how to pull money from the upper rungs of the pyramid. So we don't, I go back to the first point I was making, we don't fundamentally understand what is happening inside our economy. But when you look at the consumption data, the consumption priorities, if you break down the importation from China, if you look at what we do on e-commerce at the moment in terms of e-commerce spending, if you look at, like I said, the NIBS data, there are too many contradictions. Nothing adds up. Not even the unemployment figures. Talkback would bear me out here. I think we've spoken about this before. To find staff to work is probably the most difficult thing for a small business in Nigeria today. Apart from the skills issue, which I'm very happy, I've listened to people like the new Minister of Youth and Sports, and he's been very, very focused on these digital skills because that's what brings the youth of the 21st century. But we also need to talk about attitude, because when I talk to a lot of small businesses, the first problem they cite is we can't find people who want to work. So it's an economy that's full of paradoxes, and I think one of the key deliverables of this think tank, if you like, doing Salami, very, very experienced.
Okay, Mr. Adiagba, if I may come in here, Mr. Adiagba, there's something you said something, and I'd like you to clarify based on this message I just got from Bang Bade. He says the Economic Council needs to, that the president should take the advice of this council and put it to public scrutiny, as in carry the public along. I asked that question because of what you said about the pyramid. Up there are a few people who are well-to-do, and down there are the many who are not well-to-do, who are not doing well, living under poverty. But yet, you have events happening every day. Now, some will say that is jobs being created because at those events, people are working and they are earning some kind of keep or whatever, as the case may be. You talked about the consumption data increasing, production decreasing. So, is there a balance? Would the president putting those advice to public scrutiny help in reducing that spread between the tip of the pyramid and the base?
Absolutely. If I recall accurately what was said, they will meet every month. So it's a technical component to it. And I expect tangible, concrete action steps to emerge from their activities that are measurable. Because when we don't put things into measurable action steps, it opens the field for narrative setting, and then it becomes political discussions. And after a while, you don't even know whether you don't even know what the makeup of poverty, or you don't even know when you say, yes, we're doing well. So we must have clearly defined, tangible parameters that we can tick off
And measure.
okay, as a fallout of this advice to Mr. President.
Mr. Fashua, I said I was going to ask you a question as regards how much the public can be carried along. If some are already advising that the president should get the advice of the council, put it before the public for their scrutiny, and then take action to implement immediately, how much of that will work in moving this economy forward?
Of course, you know that the role of leadership these days is 90% communication. You can't do all the work yourself. You have to energize your people to get the job done. So, however, of course, we know that the president is not particularly very communicative as a person, which is a major drawback on his leadership, you know. So he needs to know if indeed there's an economic problem that kind of necessitates the formation of this council, and by every means there is. In fact, not only in the short term, in the medium, and of course in the long term, we are in an economic mire. If that is the case, he needs to then strategize those who are around him, because the president may not be able to do all this alone. Those who are around him as his advisors and what have you should know that this economic council should be very robust, should have stakeholders, other stakeholders who may not be economists and so on in there. And of course, that whatever decision they're taking should be as transparent as possible. It won't be a bad idea to have some of their meetings on live and let Nigerians see what they're doing. That's one aspect where Nigerians, even those of us who are a bit young, have always missed it. To know that transparency works magic. If they had a meeting once in a while and they made it open to Nigerians and it was there maybe on Facebook Live, on Twitter, and people could say, why are you guys not talking about this? Because people are going to come and with insult and what have you. Ignore the insult. Get focused. Because again, the energies of the people, of the youth of this country is what has actually been blocked in right now. We're not seeing a lot of that expression. I mean, in fact, I'll probably come at my friend Femi again, because when we reel out all those figures of how much we spend on data and on phone and how much people spend in parties, and he has this very wonderful statistics on even the black sex trade and all of that. So however, what the problem, however, is that we actually are digging a hole for ourselves in the future in this country. Many people are not spending responsibly the way they should. We spend too much money on Owambe, especially, for example, in the southwest where I'm from, but it's become a national problem. Now, Nigerians prefer to dance on top of money and all of that. I mean, for example, all these are young boys. They said some of them did scams in the US. Look at P&ID. What is it? A major scam. $9.6 billion worth of scam. All right. In fact, I've been telling people P&ID. The other time I took a step back and looked at the name, and what I was seeing was paid. These guys are here to get paid. It's a cynical joke by Michael Quinn and Brendan. What's the other guy's name? On this country, because they know that we're jokers. And they believe that look, these guys are up for the taking, and then they decide to come and do this kind of thing here. So, however, where we're digging that hole, number one, in our debt. All right, our debt profile is going to $83 billion now if the $2.5 billion that the government wants to take from World Bank comes true, and it will. The state governors also are taking about $4 billion from the World Bank. However, there's also Chinese loans coming in. There are other kind of multilateral loans coming in. Before the end of this year, God forbid, we may be looking at $100 billion, which we've never owed before. So every of this inefficiency that we see in the kind of way we spend, and that's the reason why many times even foreigners cannot understand us, because they say, you guys say you're poor, right? Your people are all over the world saying they're seeking asylum. Have you seen on 2014 when Showore went to Pretoria, the asylum center in Pretoria in South Africa, to see a lot of our boys, how they were being processed in that place. They were being frog jumped, in their thousands in Pretoria. All right, this same Showore that the government has locked down. Now, the point is, you see, the world now has a Nigerian problem. Nigeria too, we have a problem with ourselves. We need to begin to think very seriously about, and the Economic Council of Elders, because these guys are elders. I would have loved to see people like Odilim there, people like Femi there, but maybe we will form our own council at our own level. But these distinguished gentlemen that are there, they have their job cut out for them. They must hit the ground running. They must take on the hard issues. The issue of data, very important. We need to invest in data. I would rather we start afresh on the issue of our data. Too much politics went into that data. Yes. Up to tomorrow. And you see, we're not ready to tell ourselves the truth about our data.
All right.
And if you're not planning, the only thing that is worse than planning on no data is planning on wrong data. Because then you'll be investing your money in the wrong direction. So again, back to communication. The president must get out of his shell. We need more presidential chats, no matter what. Look, they will insult him, they will do whatever. He shouldn't care about insulting. Okay? The insult is nothing for a leader. However, communication is key in order to energize an economy, energize the people, and bring out the best in them. Thank you.
Mr. Mwabara, the bulk of the population of Nigeria is the youth. Maybe about 30% of Nigerians. And they are the ones we need to be thinking of in the area of employment. And we see that most of them actually find a lot of work to do on the internet. Social media is where they live, and yet they don't have ready access to it. If something were done in that area, would we not be improving our economy as well?
That's a fantastic question, but you have already answered the question, so I don't know what you expect me to say. But let me tell you, one of the things I suggested was presidential entrepreneurship competition. that will happen twice in a year. Two, I agreed with him. One of the things I suggested in Atiku also is to every quarter meet with the Nigerians via television. Let them say the problem. He takes notes, he answers, he says to our committee that will solve this problem. Because he who wears the shoe knows where it pinches him. There's no way you stay in Abuja, and also economic regions. I have studied economics for the past 30 years. I have never seen an economy run like ours. China, India, just name any country. You must allow the peripheries to take responsibilities and the center to ensure the level playing field. We continue with this, we will never get any result. Youth development must come when those in government actually believe in the youth and energize the youth. But one thing I've appreciated is that China has created over 300 to 400 million jobs during the past 40 years. And they did it because encourage small businesses, small businesses, small businesses. In America, whether you like it or not, there are the Googles, just name Microsoft, and they name them. But the drivers of American economy, about 75% of what drives the American economy is small businesses. India, you go to India, you'll be amazed. China, you'll be amazed. But here, small businesses are not even recognized. They have gone informal. And we have to formalize small businesses so that we give them avenue to get soft loans. There's a young man that is one of the best graphic artists in this country. And he's my graphic artist. I pay him small money. But this guy, if you give him 15 million naira, in the next 2 years, he will double it. And he will create more jobs for people because all the graphic consultancy we do overseas can be done in Nigeria. You know, there are sectors by sectors, small sectors that if we allow young Nigerians to participate in it, give them small soft loans here and there, they will do wonders. But the problem is that those who make financial decisions, who make investment decisions, always do not bring them on board. And that is the problem. So at the end of the day, government can sit down and call the young men and women in this country via television, and president will ask them, how can I help you? I agree with him. Ask the young men and women, how can I help you? What can you do? Go there and change the world. Go there and turn the world around. We are ready for you. Whatever you require, when you are sincere and when it is bankable, we give you that money. So do that. Why should foreigners come here, set up shops, and compete with Nigerians? Why can't we have a policy that make it difficult for foreigners to come here and set up shops? In China, you can set up shop. You can go into manufacturing. And so many other countries. We must ban foreigners from setting up shops and make Nigeria the dumping ground for substandard goods and the services from their countries.
All right.
These things.
Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for this conversation. Mr. Odilim Imewara, development economist, Tokwe Fashua, an economist, and Olufemi Adeabo, MD, Naving ICT advisors. Thank you, gentlemen, for sharing your thoughts.